All right, looking at Prophet 5 from Arturia, which is a very well put together model of both the Prophet 5 from Sequential Circuits, Dave Smith design, and the Prophet VS, which we look at in the wavetable chapter of the book. This video is about looking at Portamento, known in classical music circles as glissando, and may be referred to on some instruments as glide. So the basic function here is that if I were to hit a low note on the keyboard and then hit a high note on the keyboard, we'll hear the sound travel from one to the next. So here we go. Okay, so you notice on a couple of those it didn't really travel there, it just jumped there. This is a behavior difference with some instruments versus others. What's happening with the Prophet here is that if I press the next key before I release the previous one, it just adds that note as a basically like an interval or a chord, depending on how many you're adding. I have to release the initial key in order for the glide to occur. The other thing that can be interesting to test is what happens when you go from one or two notes on one end of the keyboard to a chord on the other end of the keyboard. You can get some really interesting kind of blending or blurring type effects that can be really useful in sound design. So play with your instrument a little bit and see what the behavior is like. We have this glide control. A lot of instruments will give this to you, which is basically just defining how quickly or slowly we get from one note to the next over that Portamento range. There you go. Okay, so much quicker response. So if you're playing a lead line, for example, and you just want them to kind of slur together, you may want it to be a little bit on the faster side. If you're trying to create this kind of growing or deepening effect, you may want to use something on the slower side. But really useful for lead lines, particularly if you're using a monophonic setting on your keyboard, and useful with chords for creating kind of special effects in sound design.